The road stretched endlessly before us, a ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the dark, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching from the trees. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Me, my girlfriend Sarah, and our two friends, Mark and Emily, had planned a weekend getaway to a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The idea was to escape the city, unplug, and spend a couple of days hiking, drinking, and laughing around a fire. The cabin belonged to Mark's uncle, a secluded spot he swore was perfect for a retreat. No neighbors, no cell service, just nature, he'd said with a grin. I remember thinking it sounded peaceful. Now I'd give anything to take back that thought. We left Richmond late on a Friday afternoon. The four of us piled into Mark's old Jeep. The drive was smooth at first, filled with bad pop music and Sarah teasing Mark about his questionable taste in flannel. Emily, always the planner, had a map spread out on her lap, double-checking our route even though Mark insisted he knew the way. "It's a straight shot up Route 16, he said, waving her off. "We'll be there before dark." Famous last words. The sun was dipping below the horizon when we hit the first snag. The GPS cut out. 1 minute it was barking directions, the next it was a blank screen stuck on recalculating. Emily frowned and tapped at her phone, but the signal was gone. "Great," she muttered, folding the map with a sigh. "Mark, you sure you know where we're going?" "I've been to the cabin before," he said, but his voice had a slight edge, like he was trying to convince himself. "It's fine. We just keep going straight." The road narrowed as we climbed higher into the mountains, the pavement giving way to gravel that crunched under the tires. The trees grew denser, their branches knitting together overhead, blocking out the last of the twilight. The air coming through the cracked windows felt colder, sharper, carrying the damp scent of moss and pine. I noticed Sarah shifting closer to me in the back seat, her hand resting on my knee. "It's creepy out here," she whispered, half joking. I squeezed her hand, but I felt it too. A vague unease, like we were driving into something we weren't supposed to find. Mark slowed the Jeep as we came to a fork in the road. There was no sign, just two paths splitting into the dark. The left was wider, rutted with tire tracks, while the right was barely a trail, overgrown with weeds. "Which way?" Emily asked, leaning forward. Mark hesitated, his hands tightening on the wheel. "Left, I think," he said finally, but he didn't sound sure. "You think?" Sarah said, raising an eyebrow. "It's been a while, okay?" he snapped, then caught himself. "Left. Definitely left." He turned the wheel and we rolled down the wider path, the gravel popping louder now, like tiny bones snapping under the tires. The deeper we went, the quieter we got. The radio had long since turned to static, and nobody bothered to change it. The forest pressed in closer, the trees looming like silent sentinels. Every now and then, a branch would scrape against the Jeep, a slow, deliberate screech that made my skin crawl. I kept glancing out the window, expecting to see something, a deer maybe, or a fox, but there was nothing. Just darkness, and the occasional glint of moonlight on the leaves. After what felt like an hour, Emily broke the silence. "Mark, this doesn't look right. We should have seen the cabin by now." "It's just up ahead," he said, but his voice was tight. He was leaning forward, squinting into the dark. The headlights barely cut through the gloom, illuminating only a few feet of road at a time. Then, abruptly, the path ended. No cabin, no clearing, just a wall of trees and a dirt turnaround barely big enough for the Jeep. "You've got to be kidding me," Sarah said, her voice sharp. "Mark, where the hell are we?" I don't know," he admitted, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "This should be it. The cabin's supposed to be right here." Emily unfolded the map again, her hands shaking slightly. "This doesn't make sense. There's no turnaround on the map. We must have taken a wrong turn." "A wrong turn where?" Mark said, his voice rising. "There was only one fork." "Maybe we should backtrack," I suggested, trying to keep calm. My heart was starting to pound, though I couldn't say why. It wasn't just being lost. It was the way the forest felt. Heavy, like it was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. Mark nodded and shifted into reverse, but before he could move, Sarah grabbed my arm. "Wait," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the trees. "Do you see that?" I followed her gaze. At first, I saw nothing but shadows. Then, just beyond the reach of the headlights, something moved. It was subtle, a flicker of motion like a branch swaying without wind. My stomach twisted. "Probably just an animal," I said, but my voice sounded hollow. "Let's go," Emily said, her tone urgent. "Now!" Mark didn't argue. He hit the gas, the Jeep lurching backward. But as we turned, the headlights swept across the trees, and for a split second, I saw it. A figure. Tall, thin, standing just inside the tree line. It wasn't moving, just watching. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I could feel its eyes on us. My breath caught, and Sarah's nails dug into my arm. "Did you see that?" she hissed. "See what?" Mark asked, focused on the road. "There was someone out there," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Probably just a trick of the light," Emily said, but she didn't sound convinced. She was staring out her window now, her face pale. Mark kept driving, faster than was probably safe on the narrow road. The gravel crunched louder, the Jeep bouncing over ruts. I kept my eyes on the trees, half expecting that figure to step out again, but the forest was still. Too still. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the hum of the engine and our own ragged breathing. We reached the fork again, and Mark didn't hesitate this time. He took the right path, the narrow one. "This has to be it," he muttered, more to himself than us. The trail was barely wide enough for the Jeep, branches scraping the sides like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, the smell of damp earth stronger. Sarah was clutching my hand so tightly it hurt, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't shake the image of that figure, its stillness, its silence. After a few minutes, the trail opened into a small clearing. There at the far end was the cabin. It was smaller than I'd pictured, a squat wooden structure with a sagging porch and dark windows that stared out like empty eyes. The relief I should have felt didn't come. Instead, the sight of it made my chest tighten. Something about it felt wrong. Like it didn't belong here, or maybe we didn't. Mark pulled up and killed the engine. The silence was immediate, oppressive. "See?" he said, forcing a smile. "Told you I'd get us here." Nobody answered. We sat there for a moment, staring at the cabin. The moonlight barely touched it, casting long, jagged shadows across the clearing. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but the air felt heavier now, like it was pressing down on us. "Let's just get inside," Emily said finally, her voice small. We grabbed our bags and stepped out, the gravel crunching under our feet. The cold bit into my skin, and I zipped up my jacket, trying to shake the growing sense of dread. Sarah stayed close, her eyes darting to the trees. As we approached the cabin, I noticed something odd. The porch steps were uneven, like they'd been built in a hurry. The door was slightly ajar, swaying faintly, though there was no breeze. Mark pushed it open and the hinges groaned, a low, mournful sound that echoed in the stillness. Inside, the cabin smelled of mildew and something sharper, like old metal. The main room was sparsely furnished. A sagging couch, a wooden table, a fireplace with a pile of ash that looked untouched for years. Mark flicked on a light switch, but nothing happened. "Power's probably out," he said, pulling a flashlight from his bag. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing dust motes floating in the air and cobwebs clinging to the corners. "Cozy," Sarah said sarcastically, but her voice trembled. "There's a generator out back," Mark said. "I'll go check it." "I'll come with you," I said quickly. The idea of him going out there alone made my skin crawl. We stepped back onto the porch, the night air colder now, biting at my face. The generator was around the side, a rusted hulk half buried in weeds. Mark fiddled with it, cursing under his breath while I held the flashlight. The beam shook in my hand and I kept glancing at the trees. The forest was silent, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting. "Got it," Mark said as the generator sputtered to life. A faint hum filled the air, and the cabin's windows flickered with weak yellow light. We started back, but as we rounded the corner, I froze. There on the porch was a footprint. Not ours. It was bare, too large, pressed into the dust like it had been there all along. "Mark!" I whispered, pointing. He stopped, his face paling. That wasn't there before," he said, his voice barely audible. We hurried inside, locking the door behind us. Sarah and Emily were on the couch, looking up as we burst in. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, reading my face. "There's a footprint," I said, my mouth dry. "On the porch." Emily's eyes widened. "What do you mean, a footprint?" "Barefoot. Big. It wasn't there when we went out." "Maybe it was one of us," Emily said, but her voice lacked conviction. "We were all wearing shoes," Mark said, his eyes fixed on the door. "And it was fresh, like someone just walked through." We stood there, the silence stretching out, broken only by the faint hum of the generator. Then, from outside came a sound, a soft, deliberate crunch like a footstep on gravel. Then another. Sarah grabbed my arm. "What was that?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was hammering, my eyes locked on the door. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment I thought maybe we'd imagined it. Then came a knock, slow, deliberate, 3 heavy thuds that echoed through the cabin like gunshots. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The knock came again, louder this time, rattling the door in its frame. "Who's out there?" Mark called, his voice cracking. No answer, just silence, thick and suffocating. Then, faintly, I heard it. A low, guttural sound, like a chuckle, but wrong. Too deep, too hollow, like it came from something that wasn't human. "We need to leave," Emily whispered, her voice shaking. "Right now." Mark nodded, grabbing his keys. "Stay together. Don't stop for anything." We moved as a group, edging toward the door. My hand was on the knob when Sarah gasped. "The window," she whispered, pointing. I turned, and my blood ran cold. Outside the nearest window, just beyond the glass, was a face. Not human, not entirely. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched tight over a skull that seemed too large. Its eyes were black, unblinking, and it was smiling, a wide, unnatural grin that showed too many teeth. Sarah screamed, and the thing vanished, melting into the dark. We didn't wait. We bolted for the Jeep, piling in as Mark fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, and we tore out of the clearing, the cabin shrinking in the rearview mirror. The trail seemed longer going back, the trees closing in tighter. The headlights flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw that figure again, standing in the middle of the path. Mark swerved, cursing, and the Jeep skidded, nearly hitting a tree. "What the hell was that?" he shouted. "Just drive!" Emily screamed. We hit the main road, the gravel giving way to asphalt. My heart was still pounding, my hands shaking as I clung to Sarah. Nobody spoke. We just drove, the forest blurring past, until we saw the faint glow of a gas station in the distance. We pulled in, the harsh fluorescent lights a stark contrast to the darkness we'd left behind. The attendant, an older man with a weathered face, looked up as we stumbled in, breathless. "You kids okay?" he asked, frowning. Mark tried to explain, his words tripping over each other. The attendant listened, his expression unreadable. When Mark finished, the man leaned back, chewing on a toothpick. "You went up to the old Carter place, didn't you?" he said, his voice low. "How'd you know?" I asked, my stomach sinking. He didn't answer right away, just stared at us, his eyes flicking to the dark outside. "Folks been going missing up there for years," he said finally. "Cabin's been empty since the 70s. No one stays long. Not after they see it. See what? Sarah whispered. The man's gaze met hers, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. The thing that lives in those woods, he said. It don't let you leave. Not really. We didn't sleep that night. We drove straight back to Richmond, the four of us silent, the weight of what we'd seen pressing down on us. We never talked about it after that, not with each other, not with anyone. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it, that low, guttural chuckle echoing in my head. And when I look out my window, I swear I see something standing at the edge of the street, just beyond the light, watching, waiting.